You know, I don't know why I pretended that I wasn't going to cover Forgotten Land, and I guess I didn't get to do it in August. I technically didn't cover it for Kirby a month, but I literally said in a video that I'd be going over it, and frankly, it'd be kind of crazy to skip it considering how popular the game is. We've got one last video before we wrap this all up, so here we go! If you like the video and want to tell me you think it's the best, please give the video a like, tell me what you think about Kirby and the Forgotten Land in the comments, and ring the notification bell after subscribing to really help me out. I promise after this video is over, there will be variety again with the YouTuber bet. If you don't need variety so much, I have covered every single main Kirby game up to this point. Finally! You can check the playlist out if you want to see why every Kirby game can be considered the best or the worst. With that, for the last time, let's do this. You can really tell that we're in a new era of Kirby now, because the plot doesn't start with Kirby taking a nap. Rather, Kirby finds enjoyment gliding around on the Warp Star when suddenly, out of nowhere, a giant rift appears in the sky. It sucks up a ton of Waddle Dees, including Bandana D, along with Kirby. This does some funky looking things to Kirby, but no time to worry about that now. Wander through this forgotten land and find out how to get back home. Kirby's Dream Land came out in Japan on April 27th, 1992. That feels about as long as it's been since I've started this series. Ugh. But the important part is that, from then until March 25th, 2022, almost 30 years had passed. A lot happens in 30 years, and the same can be said of Kirby. One thing that fans had screamed and begged about for years was a fully 3D game, and, in fairness, the devs had really wanted to do this too. Known attempts date back to one of the various forms of Kirby GCN from 2004-ish, and we've had games like Air Ride and Battle Royale be 3D games, but no Kirby-feeling Kirby game was ever 3D, you know? Then, one fateful day, the announcement hit that Kirby and the Forgotten Land would be full 3D. And to say that people freaked out would be an understatement. While it's unfortunate that it took Kirby so long to make the jump to 3D, the reason why people were so excited is that, even in 2D, Kirby games do such a good job of welcoming you into their world and immersing you. There's a reason why so many different people have so many different Kirby games as their favorite. The games are really good at doing this, not only with their masterclass visuals and music, but also by giving you levels with tons to explore. You really feel invested when you have so much looking around to do. And guess what adding a third dimension does? You got it, give you even more room to explore while adding a whole new layer to the visuals. To say that Forgotten Land did that and succeeded would be the biggest understatement I've made in any of these videos. People love Forgotten Land, and it's not just new game hype or Switch hype or whatever talking. People got the game and fell in love with it because there's so much to see that the game just lets you do. You run, you jump, you float, inhale, copy abilities, all like any other Kirby game, but that feeling of exploration is enhanced so much by running around these fully lived-in environments. Well, it's all pretty abandoned and not really lived in, but I'll be quiet. There's a big difference between running in a straight line and keeping your eyes peeled for goodies compared to moving a full 360 degrees and doing the same. The best part is that Kirby still feels and controls as great as ever. There's no awkward jump to 3D because the foundation of the game stayed the same. Instead of changing everything about the core of the game about Kirby, alienating fans and making it weird for newcomers to go back to the older games, the 3D instead warps how you move in environments and interact with puzzles. I'm putting a big focus on the feel of 3D because that really is why Forgotten Land triumphs over every other game. 3D isn't always better than 2D, but for a franchise whose main draw is simplistic exploration and fun, 3D is simply better. But if going 3D is the big appeal, won't future 3D games just take Forgotten Land and make it better? No, and for two reasons. First of all, going 3D isn't the only appeal of the game here, but even if it was, Forgotten Land is the first of its kind. Not only does that automatically make it feel the freshest and definitely the most historically important, but future games tend to build on what happened previously. Think of Dreamland 1 Adventure Superstar. Looking back, Forgotten Land will always have the best combination of simplicity and new ideas that Kirby games are so well loved for, similar to Dreamland 1. More complex games will have complexity as a negative, while other simpler 3D games will always have to be compared to it. Of course, visuals aren't all the game has going for it, as gorgeous as these 3D environments are. Gameplay is always the front and center, and Forgotten Land tosses in a ton of new ideas that the series has never gone for in the past. Most prominently, the change to copy abilities. The number was drastically reduced to only 12, and we've gone back to the style of pre-Superstar Ultra games, excluding Superstar, of course. Abilities only have 1 or 2 moves in their moveset, which was a good choice for a 3D game. Superstar-style movesets are fun and all, but it's much harder to properly assign and convey things like that in 3D. And it's not like adventure abilities weren't fun, and quite the opposite. Limiting the movesets decreases mistakes and frustration, while also upping accessibility. Of course, this is also where ability upgrades come in, and these are a really cool idea. Never before has a Kirby game had a sense of progression like this, and it's a very welcome one. Ditching the live system like Epic Yarn was a great call that was frankly a long time coming, but like Epic Yarn, there's a much more substantial purpose for collecting star coins than the beads. Kirby's pad is definitely a thing, but using star coins as in-game currency to improve your abilities is so much more interesting. Plus, look, you get new hats. Getting a cozy looking Mr. Frosty hat for ice, or double pencils with gel, Mennonite's mask for sword, Kirby 64's needle plus needle combo for, needle. There's so much fun to be had with getting new hats. But the true entertainment comes from actually using the abilities and seeing what changes happen from being upgraded. Obviously, you'll get an increase to your damage, and seeing boss and mini-boss health bars simply melt is super satisfying, but you get instances like Ranger, where the charge time and damage change, or Sword, which basically gets entirely different feeling attacks, depending on which version you have. Time Crash and Deep Sleep deserve special mention for being insanely creative, but if there's one clear winner, it is Deep Sleep. There's something about Sleep that's just so memeable, and seeing it get genuine use, other than plain old health restoration, is so cool. As far as the abilities themselves go, they made an excellent transition to 3D, upgrades included. New abilities like Drill have a lot of hidden depth to them, or are just simple fun like Ranger. Hammer deals the big damage as always, and the upgrades add both the personality and total carnage and destruction, while others require a bit more strategy, like Bomb, but the rewards for mastering them increase as you upgrade. Chain Bomb, in particular, is the Kirby equivalent of 4D chess, and is arguably the single most interesting ability a Kirby game has ever had. Other interesting ones, like Cutter, are here and accounted for, with new and interesting twists. In Cutter's case, instead of angling it, you can hold it in place, making it stronger. And let it be known, if you thought the challenge stages in Return to Dreamland were cool, the treasure roads are even better. They're about as long, but instead of having a checklist of things that you need to do to get a medal, your only goal here is to beat the time. It's a lot simpler that way, and while it may also sound easier, these stages are functioning like teaching tools that grow to test your mastery with an ability, rather than a test to see how much of a certain thing you can get done. Your reward is far more substantial than a medal too, being rare stones that you can use to upgrade your abilities. This makes the gameplay loop of playing levels, doing a treasure road, and getting a new ability upgrade super satisfying, and takes nothing away from the pace and flow of the game. Kirby games are, of course, more than just abilities, and while moving through levels is super fun, what makes exploring the levels the greatest of every Kirby game, ignoring the whole 3D thing at least, is the mission system. The caged Waddle Dees are fun to find and all, but they can at least be compared to things like chests in Great Cave and Squeak Squad. The missions, though, reward you for thinking outside of the box and doing things that you may not have thought to do otherwise. As early as the second level in the game, the 5 Tulip mission had players worldwide exploring every nook and cranny of the level to make sure they didn't miss anything in the demo, and in turn were not only rewarded via an extra Waddle Dee, but a feeling of accomplishment, one that doesn't stop the pace of the game at all. Forgotten Land wants you to play through it however you want. If you really want to go for broke, there are 300 Waddle Dees to collect, but even if you get the minimum amount and just get to the end, you're still moving through 3D landscapes with constantly changing camera angles, interesting set pieces, puzzles to solve, abilities to mess around with, bosses to fight, great music, the works. And when you want to take a little break, then hey, what kind of 3D platformer would this game be if it didn't have goofy side content? You've got Tilt and Roll, fishing, the Coliseum, Lunch Rush, the Gotcha Machine. There's a lot to do that's unrelated to the main game. You also get Kirby Another House, built just like the old one. Hey, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, you know? Where you can get health restoration for free if you aren't up to eating lunch. And who can say no to Kirby snoozing away with the pals? At the end of the day, Forgotten Land isn't a rousing success because it reinvented the series. The third dimension changes a lot of things, but this game knows what it is, a Kirby game, and uses that in tandem with the added dimension to craft an experience so masterful that tons of people worldwide fell in love with it. There's a sense of wonder and whimsy to the game that's just impossible to feel in 2D. That moment in the prologue when the music kicks in for the first time says it all. Time will tell if it remains the most popular game in the series or not. New game hype is unfortunately something that's put a stop to basically every Kirby game's popularity, aside from Ultra and Robobot, but regardless, how popular this game is, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is the best game in the series. Oh shoot, I didn't get to talk about mouthful mode, huh? Well, we're gonna have to move on. This is a pretty long video so far, but mouthful mode, good choice. Cone Bee for life. Kirby, as a series, has spent the last 10 years building upon itself. A game would release, the devs would look at what worked and make it better. They looked at what didn't work, totally rework it, and re-implement it into the next game. Some things, good or bad, had to go between games, but it makes sense to not just keep redoing the same exact thing. Similar as the games could feel, they all felt like they were trying to advance the formula and become even bigger and crazier. Star Allies, for all the issues that it has, went all out with content, post-launch support, making the fans happy with Dream Friends, the visuals. It wound up having a lot going for it. So here's this brand new game to kick off the newest era of Kirby. It's 3D, and that's it. Forgotten Land is the worst in the series because, unlike every game that came before, this is a regression of the franchise rather than a progression. But wasn't Dreamland 3 the same? No, that was a progression of Dreamland 2 that had a completely different feel from something like Superstar. Well, what about Skate Squad? Still no, because that game, while not having many new ideas, was all about improving the functionality and gameplay of Kirby and making it more fun. As for Star Allies, well, I already explained that one. So then, wouldn't Forgotten Land be a progression of, I don't know, something, anything? No, because Forgotten Land made Kirby 3D and did nothing else. Unlike your Dreamland 3s, this still feels like any other Kirby game, just with an added dimension. Unlike your Skate Squads, this doesn't really polish anything compared to before. And making it 3D doesn't make it feel like a complete and total departure from the last 10 years of Kirby, because it still has a remarkably similar flow and feel to those games. Kirby still stops on a dime, his slide moves still go at a similar distance, there's a gimmick that's supposed to separate it from the other games, and we'll get to mouthful mode, but my point is, despite being 3D, this is still just Kirby. And just being Kirby is fine. Not ideal for something like this, but certainly not enough to make a game the worst. But it's the regressions that sting the most. This can be felt most with the copy abilities, a far cry from what they've been ever since Adventure. And, credit where it's due, that was the game to introduce them on hardware that, quite frankly, shouldn't have been able to make them work. Then you have stuff like the Dreamland games, Superstar, Crystal Shards, every game expanded ability movesets in a variety of ways. And for games like Amazing Mirror and Canvas Curse that had the simple approach, the foundation of the game was totally different. And no, going 3D doesn't completely change the core of the game. Making it an open world or making it touchscreen only, that's totally different. Not being able to move diagonally. The copy abilities here are completely neutered, while also requiring you to grind for materials for them. So the way that they work is that every ability only has 1 or 2 moves. That's it. Abilities become so much more boring to use, so much quicker, compared to every other game. Abilities have always been a form of expression, and it's really hard to properly express yourself when you only have 1 move per ability to do that with. And no, this is not where ability upgrades come in, because while the stats of your abilities increase, your ability itself really doesn't. There are some very minor changes to some, like frosty ice spawning some snowmen that you can shoot at enemies, but by and large, the abilities play and feel the exact same. And actually upgrading these things, oh boy. Okay, so grinding for star coins to upgrade them isn't ideal. No other Kirby game forces you to grind for currency. Even going for keychains and stickers can be done far more naturally. But to get the rare stones, you clear treasure roads. First of all, this is the first time they messed up a proper clear time reward. Getting good clear times in Kirby games prior always netted you with some kind of reward, like getting closer to 100%, more 1-ups, or even something super simple like a gold or platinum medal. This gets you a checkmark and 50 star coins. Getting this isn't even required for 100%. It's super disappointing. But that leads into the bigger problem with the treasure roads. They only exist for 100% completion. This is an issue that other Kirby games have had, but Forgotten Land takes the cake because the act of finishing the treasure roads is not where it ends. Assuming you want to wait until you beat a boss per world to get your upgrade, as most people tend to do, you're doing a minimum of at least 15 to 20 minutes worth of treasure roads, all to go back to Waddle Dee Town, enter the shop, select the ability you want to upgrade, see the new hat, realize it's the exact same thing you were just using with slightly better stats, and you realize, what's the point? To see the new hat, get 5 seconds of excitement for all of the treasure road grinding? The collectible Waddle Dees are also handled far worse than, say, the Sunstones or the Code Cubes. You needed to collect enough of those to get to a world boss, sure, but you don't have to get that many. World 1 of Robobot only requires you to get 4, and you're forced to get one in the first level as it is. World 1 of Forgotten Land requires 17, but to be fair, you get 3 Waddle Dees for clearing every level, so that balances back down to 5. The idea of literally being given so many of something like a Sunstone or a Code Cube is really a good enough point to include here, but for the sake of argument, okay, you only need 5, which is 1 more than Robobot. Let's do some mathsies to see how many you need for later worlds. In Robobot, going in order, you need 4, then 5, then 6, then 6 again, then 7, then 7 again. 35 Code Cubes out of 100, so about a third of them. Very lenient, the rest are optional, good stuff. For Forgotten Land, once again, subtracting the Waddle Dees that you're literally given for free, you need 5, then 7, then 9, then 11, then 13, and finally capping out at 14. That's 59 Waddle Dees, which may not sound like that much, but starting with Winter Horns, World 4, the amount of Waddle Dees that you need to get becomes a bit too much. The reason why is because, unlike previous games, the Waddle Dees that you find in cages along the way aren't the only Waddle Dees to find. The missions are there too, and the devs are definitely expecting you to be able to pick up some slack if you miss caged Waddle Dees. But the problem is that the missions become painfully obtuse the longer the game goes on. And with the game being so wide open and 3D, it's much easier to not only miss caged Waddle Dees, but also missions, which makes the gameplay loop slowly hunting for caged Waddle Dees while searching every nook and cranny for missions to unlock and hoping that you don't miss any until you hit the unlock requirement. You can piece together pretty quickly that the requirement is 2 more Waddle Dees than the world prior at least, but the game is still a total drag when looking for them. That is, of course, until you think you found enough, in which case the game offers very little since the whole point of it is to explore. More exploration-focused games like Dreamland 2 and Amazing Mirror have things like the animal buddies and non-linearity to help ease repetition, not to mention copy abilities that actually mean something. Isn't it a bummer that the abilities don't offer as much as they used to? Oh, but you have mouthful modes instead! These are strange and definitely not a replacement for copy abilities, but again, compared to what the games prior had been setting up, it feels so lackluster. The Dream Friends were a tough act to follow, I guess, but these feel so mundane, even in comparison to the 4-player shenanigans. I get that the game takes place in a post-apocalypse kind of setting, but not only are some of these total wastes, yeah, I just love the mouthful that makes you spin for a couple of seconds and then you move on, but once you actually use one of them, you get the whole picture. Some, like the Arch Mouth, can really drag, while others, like the Ring Mouth, are used for the kinds of puzzles that aren't hard, but take really long. Again, very disappointing. Forgotten Land is the first 3D Kirby, and going forward, the mistakes made in this game will likely be rectified. That's comforting, but if that's the best thing I can muster to say about the game, then it really goes to show its quality. I didn't get into the things like the repetitious soundtrack, how easy the Coliseum boss rushes are, the glitches. No, the game is a mess. And unlike the first 2D game, Kirby's Dream Land, it isn't particularly replayable due to the slower pace and longer runtime. You play it once, realize it's not good, and move on. For Kirby, that just doesn't fly, resulting in Forgotten Land being the worst game in the series. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but by a pretty large margin, this game got the most answers from my Discord server. What may be a bit more of a surprise were that the opinions were pretty varied. Most people did like the game, but how much they liked it varied a lot. There were even some people who didn't like the game, or at least weren't super crazy about it. The common critiques involved the game feeling like it could have done more, as well as general gripes with the game going back to a more simplistic approach in general, but especially with abilities, compared to the insanity from the last bunch of games. For those who did like it, again, how much they did varied, with similar reasons to those who didn't like it, but most could look past that because of what the game being 3D brings to the Kirby formula. Exploring is the name of the game and all that. The levels, the boss fights, the visuals, the side content, and endgame going for 100%, all things that people really love about Forgotten Land. Going 3D may sound pretty basic, and sure, not having that until 2022 was strange, but thanks to it coming out so late, it could bypass a lot of the trappings of early 3D games and be polished right off the bat. Knowing it or not, people appreciate that. Out of every game we've covered in this series, the most amount of people, at least in my Discord server, have said that Forgotten Land was their favorite. Oh boy, okay. For those of you who are new here, 2 years ago, I did a ranking of every single Kirby game, including spin-offs that time, and typically, before the start of every Kirby month, I play catch-up with every game that I had missed. Last year, for example, I did a quickie on Kirby Fighters 2. I decided to save my takes on Forgotten Land for this video, so I'm going to be going a bit more in-depth during the final thoughts bit than I normally do before wrapping up this whole thing. I'll keep it a tad short, since I said a lot already, but please bear with me. I'll say this much right off the bat, I love Forgotten Land. I'll fully admit to missing the larger movesets from the last 10 years, but I really love games like Amazing Mirror and Canvas Curse, not despite the fact that they have simple ability movesets, but rather because they have simple ability movesets. Forgotten Land doesn't have to be any different. What matters is that they're fun, and while I don't think all of them are winners, enough of them are a great time. Drill finally seems to be picking up in popularity, which is great. I loved that ability from day one, which is kind of funny since I didn't really like Ranger from the second I started using it. Quite frankly, still don't. If you follow me on Twitch, please do, then you know that one of my new favorite abilities for beating bosses is Chain Bomb. I've always loved Bomb, but Chain Bomb just adds an entirely new layer to strategy to beating bosses that I can't get enough of. The prep work is my favorite part, especially in the Ultimate Cup. I'm not showing footage as to not spoil against Meta Knight. Let's just say things explode and you deal damage really fast. It's really funny. Oh, I can't lie though. If we're talking about my own feelings on the game, I know it's petty, but for as long as I can remember, I've loved Parasol. I really was looking forward to seeing it in a 3D traditional Kirby, and it was one of many popular abilities that got the cut. It's been almost half a year since the game launched with zero signs of updates, so all I can do is hope that either more abilities are still coming somehow, or the next game is going to have Parasol in it. My other two favorite abilities, after Parasol of course, are Bomb and Ice, and while I make my love of Chain Bomb abundantly clear, regular Ice being an amazing boss killer, as well as Frosty Ice having that hat, do make me happy. I want Parasol! I do have some other gripes, namely the storytelling being the same as it was in the 2D games. I don't think works here. The 3D Kirby really could have benefited from a lot more happening in the levels than just they're post-apocalyptic, especially when there's nothing here still until a lore dump at the end. It's pretty great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel as satisfying compared to a game like Star Allies, whose themes of friendship really pay off at the end. The theming here is 3D post-apocalypse, which just doesn't have as many interesting visual themes compared to, say, science fantasy, or exploring a mirror world, or a crayon coloring book. Speaking of, just like Amazing Mirror had no mirror, how does Forgotten Land, a game filled with animals, not have animal? Like, really? But the complaints don't distract me enough from how much I really love the game. And having let the game sink in for almost half a year, I can say that, even knowing future 3D games are coming, Forgotten Land is one of my favorites. It was certainly worth the wait, and even if it doesn't wind up staying my favorite 3D Kirby game forever, it certainly left a strong first impression for our favorite super tough Pink Puff in 3D. But listen, all I'm asking, really, just give me Forgotten Land, right? Give me Forgotten Land, but again, it could be $1,000, I don't care. Just give me Forgotten Land, but this time, give me Forgotten Land, this time, but Parasol inside, it's really not that hard, come on! So, is that it? Are we finally done? No, silly, there's a tradition that I need to follow. Kirby game rankings, remember? I normally rank all of these before August, but I saved this for the end because it's such a special moment. The moment where we, as a collective, can be together and experience moi ranking Kirby's Toy Box. Wait, what? To get through this quickly, if you watched the video I made about it around a month ago, where I said I would be ranking it for this Kirby month, you know I'm not that crazy about it, but it's not bad. I put it third at the bottom, right above Pinball Land. I do prefer the pinball board in Toy Box, so I guess there is that. But for real, where do I rank Kirby and the Forgotten Land? Well, judging by what I've already said, very highly. While I don't think it's the kind of game that can never be topped, I do think it's a great first effort, one that beats out most of Kirby's 2D endeavors. A series like Kirby that's all about exploration and immersing yourself in the environments just really benefits from the added dimension. There are some things that I'm not crazy about, like I said, but aside from not being able to turn off the slide locking onto enemies, I hate that, I can't think of anything that I really hate about it. Maybe a speedrun trick here or there bothers me, but running the game as a whole, I actually think is really fun. The more time that passed, the more I appreciated what the game had to offer, and I knew it was going in the top 10 somewhere. Before long, it had kinda reached the top 5, even above the likes of Canvas Curse and Dreamland 3. But it was around Kirby's Adventure, my actual number 5, where things got tough. Adventure is the literal first memory I have of my life, but despite all of that, I said it already, that third dimension, it really adds a lot. It's also got a simplicity to it that future 3D games probably aren't going to have, being sequels and all. And even if they do, this was still the first one that did it. And that simplicity works better here than in Adventure, which has some issues with repeating abilities and performance issues. Then came Superstar, arguably the most influential game in the series. I've kind of grown to think that it influenced a lot more outside of Kirby than in, but that doesn't mean that future games weren't influenced by Superstar. But if we just look at Superstar and Forgotten Land, KFL hasn't had the chance to be influential yet, even though we know it will be. It's razor thin, but when two games are this close together, I gotta nitpick, and Superstar has some control issues that ever so slightly bother me. The physics and feel of the game can feel off sometimes, especially in Gourmet Race, while Forgotten Land Kirby feels fantastic, and the abilities, few as there are, all feel distinct and control a lot smoother compared to the jankiness of Superstar. Of course, that jankiness is exactly why I rank Superstar so highly, so this was really tough. Then came Planet Robobot. This was easy. Look, I love Forgotten Land, but it did not have a chance here. I'm not sure when another game will come out that can compare to the trio of Superstar Ultra, Return to Dreamland, and Planet Robobot, at least for me, but Forgotten Land is the first one, at least for Kirby, that's come close. I will say that during my 24-hour birthday stream, I not only confirmed that my initial rankings from 2 years ago, aside from adding games after the fact, hadn't changed, but I had also put Forgotten Land in the top tier with the aforementioned trio, instead of the high tier with games like Superstar. I've gone back and forth on that specifically, and while I am definitely keeping Forgotten Land at number 4, it being top tier or high tier specifically may change. I'm keeping it in the top tier for now, but we'll see going forward. So, there you go. Forgotten Land is my number 4, and the somehow not dead classic game, Kirby's Toy Box, is... God, what is Toy Box? I think 35th? Avalanche was 34. When I did the rankings 2 years ago, I added 3 games since. Toy Box is 3rd from the bottom. Who cares? What matters is, even though it's a day late, like it always seems to be, Kirby month is over! Finally, I can rest. I hope you enjoyed these videos, and even though the rest of the year won't have daily uploads quite like this, keep your eyes peeled on the channel as I'll have more videos coming throughout the year. But for now, I'm gonna go relax a little bit, play more of these games that I spent the whole month rambling about. except for Toy Box. I've had enough of that game for a lifetime, thank you. Until I see you all lovely people again, I have been Claire, Kirby fan. Thank you so much for watching, and one last time, I am done!